Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning, good evening for all of you joining us. Please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves to the room and where you are calling in from. We have many registrants today and we are very excited to have you joining us. My name is Maria Santos and I am the IDA Funds Program Officer. For our blind and low vision attendees, I'm going to do a visual description. I am a chubby brown woman with black rimmed glasses and mid-length black wavy hair with a blue button down that's what I'm wearing today. Thanks for joining us for the second panel in our Logan Elevate public program series entitled Addressing the Western Gaze, Audience, Funding, and Success. This series was developed as a part of our Logan Elevate grant that supports 3 female identifying or non-binary women of color from anywhere in the world who are working on their first or second features and on the precipice on the next step of their careers. This grant is generously supported by the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, and we're extremely thankful for their continued support. The programming you'll experience in this series comes directly from the hearts and concerns of our 3 2023 Logan Elevate grantees, Aria Rote, Pallavi Somusetty, and Janai Bolos. This year, they have all been at different stages of advancing their first or second feature films. We have seen them navigate the formidable industry and champion their individual ways of making to make the films they want to make. But we have also shared learnings and supported each other as they learned strategy and best practices that they want to uphold in their own filmmaking. We are fortunate today to receive this offering from them. This series will hopefully help all of you learn, relate, and process through your own experiences as makers or supporters of filmmakers. It takes a lot of time and dedication to make this all happen, so we want to thank our funds coordinator, Katie Hurley, and our events coordinator, Armando Zamudio, who have been jointly produced this event for us today. We also want to thank the IDA Comms Department, those who have seen all of our publicity. That is very much in thanks to Zaf, Catalina, and Terrence, who all work at IDA. We'd also like to thank Keisha Knight and the Director of Funds and Advocacy. And finally, we'd like to thank our access providers, Zeke Alizea, our live captioner, and Bob Laparo and Andrea Lust, our ASL interpreters. We could not do these programs without their support. Today's panel is the brainchild of filmmaker DP Pallavi Somusetty, entitled Storytelling Our Way, Filmmakers of Color Forge Their Path. Pallavi shows me time and time again what it means to make your film while also upholding steadfast to the values that have granted you access to the community. In her first feature, Coach Emily, it's yet to be finished, Pallavi portrays a group of young Black girl climbers led by their teacher, Coach Emily. Pallavi is able to capture intimate and difficult moments because she has earned their trust, and that is evident in the footage. The trust perhaps less visibly shows up in her industry pitches, in her one-to-one market meetings, in her hiring decisions, etc. I feel so lucky that we get to learn from her today because she's not always comfortable being in the spotlight, and yet she has so much to offer in other ways. As such, she's asked the indomitable Monika Navarro to moderate for us today. So before I pass the mic to Monika, I'll first introduce her to the room. Monika Navarro is an independent documentary filmmaker and the Senior Director of Artist Programs at Firelight Media, a nonprofit supporting nonfiction filmmakers of color. Monika previously was Senior Director of Programs at Tribeca Film Institute and managed content and funding initiatives at the independent television service, ITVS. Monika has more than a decade of experience producing for public media, from her directing debut film Lost Souls, Animas Perdidas, which chronicled the journey of her uncle, a U.S. military veteran deported to Mexico, and bowed on independent lens, to producing for World Channel, American Documentary, the Peabody Award-winning PBS series Latino Americans, and most recently, Love in the Time of Fentanyl, that premiered in Independent Lens. Monika served as a mentor for the Fourth World Big Sky, Black Star, CAM, and Points North Institute as a juror for the Black Star and Hot Docs, and serves on the board of the Points North Institute as well. Monika, please take it away.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the kind introduction, and to all of the team at IDA for, I think this is such a great series, and letting your incredible grantees envision a conversation that's part of their own creative practice. And many thanks to Pallavi for inviting me to moderate. This is really her brainchild, but I was happy to lead this conversation with these brilliant women. I am a light brown skinned Chicana with I guess medium length black hair, wire rimmed glasses that were meant to be inspired by Gloria Steinem. They look a little bit more like Edward James Olmos glasses, but that's okay. I can rock that. And I've got a denim collared shirt on, and behind me a purple and red background with the Firelight logo. I'd like to bring the filmmakers on and ask you all to do a quick visual description of yourselves, just so that everybody here just meets everyone, and we jump right into the conversation. Pallavi, do you want to start, since you're really the one who brought all of us together?
Sure. Hi, I'm Pallavi Somusetty, and I am an Indian woman with brown skin, black hair, a couple of nose rings, and a blurry background.
Thank you, Pallavi. And her bio's in the chat for those, and for anyone who's visually impaired. Pallavi is a director, cinematographer, and producer whose documentary portraits center BIPOC voices in the hope that we feel fully seen, exploring intersections of identity and belonging for our communities. She's been a series producer for ADOC's Storytelling Initiative since 2020, and her feature debut and progress coach, Emily, is a 2023 Docklands Doc Pitch Industry Award winner and a 2023 IDA Logan Elevate grantee. She's been supported by IDA, CAM, California Film Institute, been supported by a lot of organizations. It's impressive. And her award-winning cinematography has appeared on Nat Geo, PBS, and other media outlets. She has a master's in journalism from UC Berkeley and enjoys rock climbing with her kids, and supporting incarcerated pregnant people as a doula when she's not making films. Zippy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves next?
Yeah, hi, my name is Zippy Kimundu. I'm a Kenyan filmmaker. I'm dark skinned with very thin dreadlocks, wearing a checked purple and white top and a black sweater.
And Zippy is an award-winning Kenyan filmmaker who has been working in film and TV for nearly 2 decades across continents. She co-directed a short documentary, A Fork, a Spoon, and a Night, with Mira Nair for Tribeca's Power of Words series, and was the assistant editor on the Disney film Queen of Katwe. Her latest feature documentary, Our Land, Our Freedom, that she co-produced and co-directed, premiered at IDFA last year. Zippy holds an MFA from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts and is a film educator for underrepresented communities. She's also the founder of the woman-led film and TV production company and collective based in Nairobi and Kilifi, Kenya, working to ignite political consciousness and action. And Jude, please give us a visual description, and you'll find Jude's bio in the chat, and I'll read it after Jude describes themselves.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Jude Chehab. I am an Arab woman. I'm wearing a brownish gold hijab head covering. I'm wearing glasses and a white shirt. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Jude. And Jude Chehab is an award-winning Lebanese-American filmmaker whose cinematic interests have drawn her to the exploration of the esoteric, the spiritual, and the unknown. A richly layered visual and intimate personal shooting style developed under the mentorship of Abbas Kiarostami's final student group. Her work has been awarded fellowships through CAM, Points North Institute, Firelight Media, and Chicken and Egg. Jude's first feature documentary, Q, was named one of the best documentaries of 2023 by Vogue magazine and was supported by IDA, ITVS, TFI, and the Sundance Institute, and won the Albert Maysles Award for Best New Documentary Director at Tribeca and the Grand Jury Award for Best First Feature at Sheffield Doc Fest. Also a Filmwana Cinema Eye honor, and was nominated for 2 IDA awards. And she's part of Doc NYC's 40 Under 40, and Filmmaker magazine named her one of the 25 new faces of independent film. So you can see why I was so excited to lead this conversation. This is a brilliant group and really spans so many forms, continents, lived experiences, and sensibilities. And the purpose of this conversation, as inspired by Pallavi, is to answer these questions. How can we be supported to tell stories outside of the dominant gaze? If most formative spaces for international artists are trying to make a film accessible to a mass audience? And how can we create a new global South in diaspora forms for our specific audiences, particularly during a time when resources are scarce and the sustainability of our work is threatened? So that's what we hope to answer today. And I thought that it might be interesting to frame this conversation around a bit of the past, present, and future to kind of understand everyone's origins into documentary and some of the hard lessons learned in their previous films or the films that they are currently bringing into fruition. How are they honing those learnings, and where can we look towards? And we will have time for questions at the end, so definitely keep them in the chat, and Katie will be helping me gather all those to ask at the end. So I want to start with you, Zippy. Tell us a little bit about your origin into nonfiction filmmaking, and if any of that, as you got started, included any pushback to you resisting any dominant narratives or forms.
Great, yeah. So yeah, I studied journalism in Kenya, and I, went to Uganda to work as an editor after that. And when I was there, I remember my first instance of realizing how storytelling was being perceived, or how I could tell the story, is that I was editing a lot of work for international media organizations. And I remember this one particular edit I edited, and then I was told, you forgot this very important scene. And that scene was basically a scene, a big camera was taken into like a slum in the middle of nowhere that had nothing to do with the story. And then they said, you need to include that. And I said, that has got nothing to do with the story. The story was about this, this girl from the UK coming into Africa to and experience kids in school, and because she had won a language competition. And they said, okay, no, but that's really important. And I said, no, it's not part of the story. And I think that's and I was fired for that as a very young editor. And I think that's the time I said, like, I wanted to be able to go to school, I studied journalism, to be able to go further into education and be able to tell my own stories. And I think that's when I decided to jump and learn directing and writing at NYU. And then, from there on, I never went back. I've been able to tell the stories that I want to tell, and not necessarily kind of being a puppet to kind of stories that I didn't believe in. I mean, that was just one of the instances that made me decide that I really wanted to tell stories. And because there was a lot of stories being told, about us, here, especially in the African continent, it's growing now. I'll continue, but it's a growing group of interesting filmmakers. But before that, there was really no stories told by us.
So interesting that you being fired for standing up for what you felt was an authentic point of view then sort of set you on your path. Do you want to set up the clip for us, for those who haven't yet got to see Our Land, Our Freedom, just to let us know what we're going to be watching, because we're kind of fast forwarding now to you completing Our Land, Our Freedom. Just let us know what we're going to be seeing in the clip before we see it, Zippy.
Oh, yeah. So I'm the co-director and co-producer of the film Our Land, Our Freedom, together with Mina Nanji, who I hope is somewhere listening. So our story is about an amazing Kenyan woman who is fighting for the rights of freedom fighters to get their land back that was taken away during the British colonial era. But I can talk more about that after we watch the clip.
Tondũ mangĩkiuga mĩgũnda nĩ yao rĩ, mĩgũnda nĩ ya Mũabirika.
was born in a freedom fighters family. My mother was a freedom fighter. My father was the leader of the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. The British called them the Mau Mau.
Ithaka iria ciarĩ citũ tũgĩtunywo nĩcio mũthũngũ akenagĩra nacio na mũndũ ũrĩa akahutithagio wĩra kuo.
History of Kenya has been distorted. The first books were written by white men, portraying my Mau Mau as savages.
Mĩaka itũ nĩ gũthira tũramũnengere. Thirikari ya Ngeretha yuga kwĩ Mau Mau moragĩtwo. Yuga nĩ mĩkora yoragĩtwo.
Kai, rĩu nĩkĩ gĩkĩ?
No mũndũ.
The Mau Mau and their families would come to my office. They were landless and forgotten. And so I decided that I must help them.
Ũkĩra ũthiĩ ũcokanĩrĩrie andũ ũmere tondũ rĩu mĩgũnda nĩ yagire kuma twaheo wĩyathi.
Atĩ mũkwenda kĩ?
Sometimes I'm so scared.
Tafadhali usiingie mambo ya siasa.
The land issue in Kenya is very sensitive.
So we should remain poor because the land issue is very sensitive.
Haki ya Mungu mtajaribu, hamutaniweza. Risasi tu ndio itaweza mimi.
Thank you, Zippy. What a thorough line, I think, from you resisting kind of like a colonial mindset in the edit room to just really going there with your first film and looking at the history in Kenya. It's powerful. Pallavi, I want to turn it to you. Tell us about your origin story into nonfiction filmmaking, and if you also encountered any resistance as you started to develop your craft and your voice.
Yeah, I have a very uninteresting way of finding my way to documentary filmmaking. I moved to New York from California to be a writer and journalist, and I was coming out of some very active years in undergrad in student movements, but I couldn't find writing jobs at all, nor writing jobs that reflected my values. And I ended up just working at an ad agency in the research department, and we were tasked with proving that we understood our clients' target market. And so we would make these short films with insights from those audiences. So I call those films internal branded docs because no one ever saw them except the clients and maybe our creatives internally. But the department didn't have a lot of funding. And so I stepped up as a producer and really honed my producing chops there. And the work was fun and challenging, but self-care was really at an all-time low. And one of the last films I worked on, the last film that I worked on there, I can't name the drug, but there was a pharmaceutical that was in the news for causing heart problems in patients. And our client wanted us to create a documentary to feature patients whose lives were improved by the drug because their sales reps were so demotivated in, selling a drug that was harming people. And so went around, found patients, filmed them, made this doc, but it was so antithetical to who I am, to who I was. And it was the wake-up call that brought me back home to California and really try to build a career out of social justice filmmaking. And so I think so many of us filmmakers are inspired by existing films and filmmakers or by communities and movements we want to film. And I am too, but for me, coming to documentary was inspired by running away from branded docs. So for that reason, I feel like I got into it in the corporate world and it feels uninteresting, but really coming to the type of doc work that I do now felt like I was coming home.
And maybe you can both set up the clip for Coach Emily and help us, and also frame how you took the leap into independent filmmaking and to this film, which is a work in progress.
Yeah. So after the ad agency, I shifted to a nonprofit and I worked on producing mission-driven videos for a few years, and then took a career kind of pivot at the Berkeley J School, took that as an opportunity to settle into freelance DP and cinematography work after that. And it's in the last 5 years, or 5 years ago, that I found what would be my first independent doc that's sort of like personally driven, that I wanted to film. And very hyper local to me. I live in Oakland, California, on Ohlone territory. I'm a mother of 2, and I always joke that I don't want to date or work outside of my zip code, especially in these early parenting years. I've been just on the lookout for very hyper local stories that align with my values and my interests. And so in 2019, I began work on what is now my first feature doc in production. Working title is Coach Emily. It's about an Oakland-based rock climbing coach named Emily Taylor, and the work that she's doing with a group of students called Brown Girls Climbing, and kind of their trajectory, their struggles, and their joy over the last 5 years. And so there's just a short teaser that you'll see.
Thank you.
There's this black, angry woman voice that's just so angry and so hurt and so tired.
I don't think that I would be the person I am today without my child. And without her, I don't know if I would have ever slowed down to find my black joy.
I created Brown Girls Climbing for Milo.
We have this van and it's there to take us to adventure. It's there to take us and expand our experiences.
Keep trying, keep trying.
Brown Girls Climbing introduced to the world that folks don't have marginalized black and brown girls that they're bringing in the climbing gym. It's so racist in climbing. I forget about it because I love it so much.
You did it.
With Emily, it feels like there's a space where I can just be myself.
She made me feel like I was worthy, and I struggled a lot with that.
Coach Emily makes me feel confident and safe.
When I'm on the rock, it just feels very liberating. It's almost as if you're detached from like worldly problems.
This woman walks by and says, "You nigger girls need to get out of this park."
That wasn't the first time someone called me that word, but it's still very shocking.
They said, we're canceling all your programs and you're also banned from the gym.
It's so much pain.
Emily taught me how to take up space, and I will forever be so grateful for that.
I found the perfect crew of girls who are just amazing and ready to climb and ready to live through life, and I'm not giving up on you. So how do we do this?
Oh, thank you, Pallavi. That was really powerful. Jude, let's bring you into the conversation. You had a very unique entry into documentary filmmaking. So tell us a little bit about how you came up as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think specifically, with film overall, as a starting point, growing up, my mom would always tell me, Jude, you're an Arab, you're a Muslim, you're a woman, you have a lot against you, do something about it, and really saw the value in film and art and culture, and when it's not really valued in the region as much, or we don't have time to value it as much. And so I think I always had that inspiration to be a filmmaker, and I went to film school, but then I kind of have a bit of a different entry point into documentary, which I think is, differs a little bit from like Zippy, for example, but I was part of fellowship called Next Doc, and I was like fresh out of film school, and it introduced me to documentary in a way that was like really rooted me in kind of the circumstances that documentary even exists from, and kind of where it began, and framed it in that way, and framed how we should, our role in it, and how we should kind of move it forward, and that we do have a strong role in it, and to take back kind of that craft. And so I think that was really helpful to not come to it and find that out as I kind of went along. And obviously it still happened where it was like the harsh reality of, you know, kind of what it all means, and really where is your role in the industry and in the field. And I feel like making Q my first feature, you know, there was a bit of resistance and pushback. And I think the biggest challenge for me in making it was like just trying to, you know, stay true to our voice and, you know, the people that were making the film, and very small group, but really just like, how do I, you know, kind of not water down the story, and not tailor it truly to the West. And so, yeah, but I think that Next Doc beginning really helped shape how I saw documentary.
And I think you set up, do you want to set up Q, or do you want to just roll it? Because I feel like that makes us really, and I see Balin's giving some love in the chat. I'm glad to see Balin.
Balin, co-founder of Next Doc. Yeah, I can set it up. I mean, it's a personal documentary about my mom, my grandmother, and I's relationship to a secretive Muslim women's group in Lebanon. It premiered a year ago. Yeah, we can just play the trailer.
ليش عم تكبوا هون الزبالة؟ من فضلك ليه عم تكب زبالة هون؟
معك المكتوب هلا؟ مين بعت لك الرسالة؟
الشيخة الكبيرة.
فيك تقري على العالم؟ ليه متوترة هلا؟
ماني موترة، عادي. دكتورة هبة خضر، نحن يا هبة متبعون ولسنا مبتدعون، طريقنا سهل ومضيء، تركتكم على المحجة البيضاء، ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها زائغ. نحن حريصون عليك كما أنت حريصة علينا، ونحن نتواصى بالحق والصبر. طريقك يا هبة طويل وخطير، ولا يوجد سلامة مع المخالفة. يقلب الله النتائج والنهايات، ولكن لا يصل متلفت. ما جعل الله شفاء أمتي على ما حرم عليه.
ليه ما بتقولوا اسمائهم؟
ما بعرف، هيك تعودنا.
I'd love to actually kick off the conversation with something Jude just shared of their formative experience with Next Doc that I think connects back to something you said, Zippy. But I always, you know, think about how radical it is to just be a woman of color on this side of the camera. And for so long, the history of documentary was really a colonialist exercise. And Zippy, you spoke about people that often came in, and it's still quite new for folks to be telling the story from their point of view and taking those means of production into their own hands. And that was Jude's entryway after film school. And Pallavi resisted the branded content to move into her finding her own voice. So I'm just curious how you all see that question that was posed to Jude as a young filmmaker of what do you do now, having these means of production in your own hands? How has that shaped like the type of stories you want to tell or the career you want to build? Jude, do you want to, or Zippy came off the mic first? I always start with Zippy.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think I'll just point out at our land, our freedom. When we started making the film 8 years ago with Mina, it was just the two of us. But the what we knew that we wanted to tell the story from the point of view of the freedom fighters who had never been heard, because this story of colonization had been told from the British point of view for years. And that was a big issue, because a lot of people would ask us, like, why don't you have the British voice? Why don't you have this voice? Why? But I think for us, it was really important. At first, we were like, it's a big thing that we knew, and that affected a lot of our funding, because a lot of people just didn't believe that this would be a feature. How are you going to watch, there's people talking for 90 minutes? But I think what we kept saying that this is a story for now. But what really changed over the years is like the story of decolonization started being talked about, and the issue of land. And I think and with the Black Lives Matter movement, people started seeing this story as relevant. So then it became this universal story that people wanted to be a part of. And I feel like, okay, apart from, of course, there was a few funders who had believed in what we wanted to do at first, but I think it was the, kind of sticking to our guts and saying, like, we don't want to give up these rights or tell the story the way we want to tell for you to give us the money. So but I think we kind of persisted, and then I think the beauty of collaboration and co-productions is really important, because then adding more people into the team, right? You're like, okay, I don't want to lose the rights, but someone else that you bring in, how do they help in your connection to the world and your storytelling? But I feel like we were told a lot of times, like, bring, yeah, I don't want to go into the details because we might have those people in the room. But I think what was more important, we kept to what we wanted to tell. And the biggest thing also we wanted to do was impact. We knew that we wanted to keep the rights to be able to show this film, in the grassroots, in the village. And if we were able to, to give that, we wouldn't be able to be showing it. So luckily, 8 years ago, it's a lot of lessons. Like, it took us 8 years. We're in a different space right now. Even with the other films that I'm making, we like figuring out how to navigate these spaces and telling important stories and not compromising. I think has been a really big win for us as a team for our film and for the films that we are making right now. I don't know if that answers. You're muted.
I just saw that. Jude, maybe you can continue that. Can you tell us more? You mentioned that you really, despite the tremendous support you got to make the film, you also had to resist really a Western kind of gaze or narrative and really stay true to your own vision, your own voice, your own culture and spiritual practice. So can you talk about that, not compromising, or just tell us more about what that actually looked like in practice for you?
Yeah, I think it was such an amazing experience, just in terms of, like, we did get a lot of support, very early on. And I think part of it obviously is, like, this is a very intimate Muslim woman's story, and people haven't seen that, and that was exciting to people. But at the same time, you know, there was this like cult aspect to the film, and you know, I at the time as well wasn't sure what the film was going to be, and so I was just curious about this group, and I really was in my written materials, even in the visual material, it was coming off as like more of this cult film, you know, and maybe looking back now, I'm like, oh, maybe maybe also people that were supporting the film, you know, kind of yeah, we're interested in more of this sensationalist story. And as we kept filming, and it was like, no, this is what is in the material. Like, this is what the material is saying. And also checking in with myself about like, what is my intention? And, you know, kind of, you know, I want to be able to like sleep well at night, you know, when I have a film that I feel like, you know, even my mom who's in the film, if she was an audience member, that she would feel comfortable with it. And I'm not kind of going against my community and my values. And so I think it's like a tightrope, and we tried our best to like stay balanced on it, and to you know, give enough, but also kind of just remain steadfast in what we wanted to say. And I don't know, I had a mentor that like when I would share with her feedback that we got from whatever institutions or whoever that was giving feedback on the film, she was just like, take the money and run. So not to give that as advice to everyone, but yeah, I think sometimes it comes in handy. And I just like, at the end of the day, you know, these are the people that kind of are in the way almost of like making our films. Like, what does that mean? How do we end up making them if it's not the film that they envision? That's kind of what I'm thinking about a lot lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think of that take the money and run is also just reminding yourself that like you are the author of the film. You know, you can get kind of all this feedback or pushback, but to stay grounded in why you're doing it in your voice, that does take a lot of strength to kind of not be you know, pushed and pulled in all those directions. Probably watching your clip, which I saw there was excitement in the chat, and I am so excited for when it's done. It's really compelling what you already have, but it's interesting, like there's so many tropes with sports documentaries, or like even documentaries where there's like groups of young kids kind of, it's not a competition film, but you know, there's formulas in some ways for these types of documentaries to make it successful. But I know you are not trying to make something that falls into any sort of trope. So how have you navigated this film as it's your first feature and you're resisting these tropes and you're grounding it in a very like femme, you know, women and young girls of color, and keeping it, you know, rooted in their voice and yours?
I think for me, I'm trying to keep audience in mind first and foremost. There's a filmmaker, Nasheen Dadaboy, who in a pitch forum once, when she was asked who her audience is, had said, my audience is Muslim Americans, and didn't go wide, and was like very specific and true to who her audience is. And I feel really inspired by that. And I like, that's really brave to not, you know, play the game of, oh, like these really wide audiences. And if I'm being very truthful, my audience are the brown girls climbing students. And so I try to keep them in mind. You know, what will encourage them to feel seen and represented and understood and find meaning in the film in the way that they find meaning in what they're doing. And so I'm trying to keep that in mind as I navigate industry pushback. One thing I'll just say about industry, for me in navigating industry, is that I guess I used to see myself as sort of outside of the gates, and that was my identity as a filmmaker, and I connected with colleagues in that way, and I can't say that anymore. I'm supported by so many, and I think you know, industry are also people. You are industry. So is Maria and Keisha at IDA. And I think the way that I've felt just more connected, and like it's not some big bad monolith, is people and feeling heard and supported by them. So so I have, you know, gotten some support for this film, but I've also received a lot of pushback, and I think some of the pushback has been in funder feedback, in the rejections, of which I have so many. In the clip that you saw, you see that the coach and the program are banned from a local gym in Oakland, a set of gyms actually, for reasons that you'll find out in the film. But what they do afterwards, and what my work sample and treatment in my .core proposal, what they illustrate is Emily and her students and the parents, the community's path forward is actually to, you know, move outside. So, okay, so they don't have access to an indoor gym. They move outside and, you know, explore outdoor adventuring, and she sort of builds her own program that's really beautiful and incorporates self-care. And it's kind of like she's building her own table and chairs, or whatever that analogy is. But you know, and feedback I've gotten is like, why didn't they protest? Why don't you have footage of them protesting? Or, you know, like I really missed, I don't know, there was like questions about how Emily responded to what was a really traumatic situation of being blacklisted in the climbing industry, and by this group of gyms. And I just felt really like that's not the only that's not the only type of feedback I've received that's along that line. But it just felt like I am a director, but I'm not going to orchestrate a situation that isn't true. And how can you want to police, you know, Emily's response to this traumatic situation? It just felt really like, it just, you know, it was hard to receive that feedback. And it was, and feedback like that, that questions what the people are doing or the story I'm telling, when the story I'm telling is like, yes, I can tell it in a certain type of way, but there's also like the real chronological truth. And it just felt very much like that was like this Western way of dealing with something that you're, you know, that felt like a trope. And so that, you know, the way that I sort of navigate or push back is to, you know, to continue lean on my community, first of all, because that's the biggest thing for me. But you know, yeah, it's tough to navigate, but I'm holding true to what the story is telling me it needs to be, what the film needs to be. And there might be like, there are some gems in, even if you don't agree with the feedback, sometimes there's just like, oh, it does get you to think about things a certain way. And so I do start to shift the way that I communicate about the film and the story, so that the people that, you know, aren't with me, that aren't women of color, or, you know, that they can still understand what I'm trying to tell.
So ultimately, you feel most responsible to those young women who are allowing you into their lives, and they are your audience. But I saw Zippy and Jude kind of both nodding and affirming when you talked about being recommended to kind of like assumptions about the narrative, or why isn't this happening, that is maybe an easy narrative solution or something that's expected, but you're all trying to do something different that is maybe outside of what has been kind of, you know, what folks have seen before. So how do you all navigate that? Like, I think I've thought a lot too about this group of women. Like, I think all being people of the diaspora, and again, kind of going back to that, like the form itself was like a form where it was often like white men from generational wealth that were going and like making films often outside of their own communities or even countries. But, you know, with the advent of digital filmmaking, like I think that has kind of shifted who can tell those stories. And with the gains that have been made in so many of the collectives that you all are part of, various collectives, either behind the scenes or very much front and center of helping move the industry towards kind of being more equitable. So I guess, and you all also have your own kind of visions of the types of films you want to make. So how do you think that you're starting to see the form itself and maybe even like the landscape, like the audience is changing and is being influenced by filmmakers like yourselves? I mean, Pallavi talked about audience, but I think that like I see a shift in like the films made by women like you and by your own films. But then I wonder if like you're seeing shifts in like where folks are receptive to your ideas or where the audiences are receptive to your ideas and your stories.
No, for sure. I mean, I was waving. I was just like nodding really hard what Pallavi was saying. And yes, I think it helps. Like knowing that industry is human, you know, because I think like at first it was like really difficult to navigate the space because you are afraid of what, you know. But I think for me, it was like the power of knowing that you know exactly what you want to say. Then it gives you the power to really pitch with all the, you know, the kind of confidence and you know, I've made a lot of, yeah, it's been amazing funders and partners who've come on board. But even just like very recently, I was pitching, I'm pitching 2 other projects. So one of them, you know, they told me, oh, okay, it's another story about, you know, led by a strong woman. It says, but at least now it's not about colonialism, it's about tribes fighting each other. And I was just like, well, you know, and anyway, but it became a very long conversation. But because I knew that, like, I know how everyone else had responded to it, I was very firm in saying that this is, you know, and then, you know, they kind of started reframing that conversation. And also, like in another film that I'm making, a Western crew came into the same space to make a documentary, basically came in and shot, and like, there was quite a problematic way in the way they made the film that, like, I'm even discussing with the characters. But at the end of the day, the people are like, you know, we want you to come tell the story because we know that you're going to tell our truth. Because by the time they were telling the stories, it's been really manipulated in a way that is not them anymore. It's just like, kind of, how do you tell the stories? So I think navigating is like just really kind of sticking to, like, I know I'm, you know, it's facts. I'm not trying to manipulate anything. I know what I want to say. And there's a lot of people now who believe in the stories that we want to tell. You know, a lot of funders and who have become, you know, partners in what we do. So it takes a lot of patience and a lot of just talking a lot to people who are going through the same thing and finding, you know, yeah, I'm like sticking to this voice.
What about you, Jude? I mean, you spoke about like mentorship, but when I saw your film, I was just, when I saw your final film, I was just astounded, having the privilege of knowing you at like so many stages throughout the film, and knowing that you went home to Lebanon and, you know, you and your husband edited the film, and it just, I saw like your growth as an artist in the film and realized like, oh, it maybe needed this much time, because like this was always the vision Jude had, but it took the time and maybe that patience that Zippy's talking about. But you know, how I realized like you were doing something really radical with the form in many ways, but but I wondered, did you need to go home to kind of quiet the noise and really ground yourself in who you were making it for and being really true to you and your mother and your community story?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's exactly it. Like, it really felt like it was going to be one film if I was still in New York and coming and going for like a week at a time, filming really quick and then leaving. And then it was going to be a whole other film, you know, if I was here. And I think all that, the intimacy that's in the film is because I was here, you know, even like big events that happen in the film, I wouldn't have gotten them, you know, if I wasn't with the family. And it was good to just kind of be away from it all. I think there's also like there's a pressure as well in our field of, having an idea and quickly kind of putting it out. And, like it's documentary. Like the beautiful thing about it is how it unfolds in front of you and how like you also grow with it. And, when I started the film, I was like, I think I was like 22. So, by the time it came out, actually, no, that's crazy. I think I was 23. And then it came out and I was like 28, like I also grew and kind of my style grew. And even if I watch it now, I'll look back and say, I wish I did this thing different. But, so I think being here and then having really good mentorship, people that like really, I think it's hard to find mentors that like actually believe in your vision and aren't just trying to like enforce their own vision on you. And I think I was really lucky to have people that like I trusted. And it was like, when I send you a cut of the film, I know it's in good hands and I know that you kind of, you understand the intention, right? And so that was really helpful.
I know we're going to turn it soon to a Q&A, and I could keep talking for another hour with you all, but I want to look a little future forward. What do you see as working in the doc ecosystem? And that can also be, we talked about how institutions are people too. Institutions are made of people who work in film that care about filmmakers. So that can also be like, who is working, like who or what organizations or collectives have been energizing you, because they show a deep care for your creative practice or the creative practice of folks that, are part of that are in the trenches with you working on their films. What are the bright lights? Pallavi, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I'll just give a shout out to Brown Girl Stock Mafia and ADOC, where I also work in a leadership role. And probably the first, I think, so there's all these fellowships we can't get in, right? There's all sorts of opportunities that we get rejected for countless times. And I think Brown Girls was the first one to create to me, a system where we could create our own fellowships with their mastermind program. And ADOC soon followed with ADOC Allies. And I think for me, the support systems, and, they would group filmmakers together based on like-minded things or location, or in the last year, Monika, you and I connected in a parenting mastermind. But I think creating your own fellowships and like building what you want and need, like identifying the need and then meeting each other's needs and kind of building your ride or die community has been really energizing for me. And so I like that is ecosystem, and that's also filmmakers just doing the work. But yeah, I think for me, that's one thing that I've found really energizing. And then I've just in general seen from institutions lately an emphasis on community care. And I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm here for it. And I think, like it might be deadline extensions or just approving therapy in a line item, in your budget for your film or childcare or whatever it is, but people are starting to care for who we are as a whole. And I'm starting to see, ripples of that coming from industry, and I'm here for it.
Zippy, what's energizing you, or what do you see as really working in the ecosystem right now?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree on mentorships, like looking for people who really kind of, believe you. And, like I started working when I was like very early in my career. Miranaya is the one who forced me to go to film school. I thought, well, I'm a Kenyan editor, and, I didn't realize how important it was to be able to do this. So I would say, mentors, looking at people. And then the next one is a team, kind of like choosing the team that really you come together and figure out your strengths, your weaknesses, and work together. So like for our Land of Freedom, it was amazing to know, like with Mina and it was like, we're very different strengths, and we were able to kind of figure how to work that out, and it was really helpful. And bringing in more people who strengthen us. So we brought in another co-producer who brought another, powerful team of women mostly, who are able to execute this team. In the continent, a shout out to DocuBoxes Africa. They were the first people to start bringing a group of filmmakers together. Before, we didn't know about creative documentary. It was really, we just did a lot of, like everyone said, like, we did a lot of NGO documentaries, and like, forming those, regional or country, like smaller groups that, kind of fire you up to do things. That's really great. We even formed something called the film therapy, a little Nairobi group. We kind of like meet together, we talk and share. And lastly, of course, with the funders who now really understand, we've got support from a lot of like, funders who really understand the things that we want to do. And like, they don't, they just support, not interfere. So that has been really, really amazing. And looking into the impact work that our films are doing, that really, gives me motivation to go on, because our films, need, say something and create conversations. I just screened our film to like a group of really old women in South Africa, and like the reaction was just like fired up. It's like it's not their community, but they see exactly what we're saying and reacting to it. So yeah,
I see the parallel.
So it's really a good space to be.
Pallavi, I saw you gave a shout out in the chat to Bayvac. Do you want to give them some love really quick?
Yes, I see Jen in the in the audience. Bayvac, the last time I got rejected from their fellowship, they offered me a mentorship in place. They have, I think it's called Media Maker Connect, but it was really, there was just a lot of care for people, whether you get in or not. And they helped me identify a need that my work sample needed some work, and paired us with a consulting editor. And we worked on it, and a year later applied, and I just got into the fellowship and have been participating this year. But I just really love that every session, and this last session, there is an emphasis on it's not just our films, but like everything that we're bringing to the table and how that informs our practices, and care for each other, for ourselves and our participants. So just a shout out to Jen, Dawn, and Brittany, and my fellows.
Jude, what's energizing you, or where do you see that thing? Where is it working in the field?
Definitely all the groups that were mentioned. I think maybe, I don't know if everyone feels this way, but like, at least for me, I wouldn't have gotten this far in the film out if we didn't have support from all of these organizations. I think something that really was energizing in making the film also was just like filmmaker peers, and seeing that we're going through the same struggles and having the same challenges, and kind of pushing each other to keep going. I think right now, after releasing the film, kind of seeing what comes with distribution as well, that has made me want to do this again, because I feel like that, like, who wants to do this all over again in 5 years, has just been really the audience. And I think realizing, like you were saying, Zippy, like the screening that you had, I'm sure that was like so emotional, and it's just incredible. Like, and I think in those moments, you're like, everything was worth it. And we had some screenings that we put together. A lot of like Arabs, Muslims came, and it was just like, it was so special. And I think knowing that they exist, the audience exists, they want to see your films. Now the question is, how do you get the films to them? But just to know that they're there, and I think that is kind of what's energizing me, is looking for ways to get to them, and making sure that they see the work that we're making.
Yeah, I had a question about that. I see just one question in the chat. So I'm going to give all of you amazing filmmakers and funders and industry folk a minute to put a question in the chat and take advantage of that time to ask another question about audience. Because I had great art teachers from like a very young age, and we would do crits starting at 14 years old with our artwork. So I think that's part of like developed like my critical practice, is that I would do like a charcoal self-portrait at 14 and then have to put it up and talk to other 14-year-olds about what I was trying to do in that portrait. But I learned through that half of it is making work, half of it is the dialogue about the work. And it's so interesting when sometimes people see themselves or see connections or see your growth. So I am curious about that, just because I think you all must have really strong dialogue. So what has been the dialogue with the audiences for your films, and does that influence how you distribute films in the future? Maybe Jude, you can kind of continue the thought, because you're saying they're there. So how are you thinking about distribution? Because I think often, part of Firelight's like ethos has always been not just like resourcing the filmmakers, but also bringing it to communities of color, because for many years, like our communities, were not valued. And I think there's incredible places that, in the absence, like grassroots places, are things like, Cam Fest and Black Star, and incredible spaces that have valued those audiences and curated specifically for them. But what, in like your own film experience, have you started to see of like who your audience is and where you might reach them?
I'm still figuring it out. But I think okay, so now we're on Criterion Channel, which is amazing. It's a very specific audience, obviously. I don't think it's like, no one in my family knows what it is. So it's like how do we get to that audience? I don't know. I mean, I think it's truly a matter of like, I think back to like this past year when the film was coming out, and seeing the interest, and like we got a lot of emails and like messages like, how can we see the film? How can we see the film? And I don't know, at this point, we might just get an aggregator and get it up on these platforms, and so then we can direct people there. And I think it's really a matter of like being very grassroots. I think personally, like that's what kind of worked. We had like the screening in Houston that I really set up on my own, and it was amazing. It was like sold out, and people kept telling people, and it just feels like to have the film somewhere where you can direct people, and then continue to grow it amongst your community. I'm clearly still figuring it out.
No, but I think you're in it, and you're seeing that how strong even the word of mouth is, which is awesome. Pallavi, you talked about your audience as these like core young girls you're filming with, but then there are going to be like many like young women of color who like them will want to see themselves like on screen and be in that experience, and have never maybe themselves are thinking about like how do they take up space. So how are you thinking about audience for Coach Emily beyond that primary of those 5 or 7 young women?
Yeah. So the film was born in community, in the climbing and communities of color here in Oakland, and that's sort of where I want it to land. And so we're really open to all kinds of distribution, but we want access specifically to young kids of color across the country and around the world, to be able to see the film and engage with it. I think for us, it's not just about watching the film, but about thinking about the messages that we're sending. There's kind of a storyline of going through struggles, and then radical self-care, and then joy. And I think we'd love to sort of pair the film with encouragement to, set boundaries for oneself as a young person, or, like the power of saying no, or like really being in touch with ourselves. And so that's what we're trying to figure out now. Maybe that's some kind of an impact campaign.
Teaching modules that would go alongside a screening with the film.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking about for those audiences. And the way that we're going to get there is we've already sort of like midway through production shared cuts of various storylines with students and coach, and will continue to do so. The final film will not be a surprise to anyone in the film. And then after, and we'll open that up to other potential audience members as well.
So you've got a local audience, and then you're thinking about educational screenings or community screenings more broadly. And Jude, you've kind of realized you've got this kind of art house audience with the Criterion Channel, but you're still seeing how to build the diaspora of the Muslim audience in the US and abroad. Zippy, as you're like bringing your film, it's screened internationally. You've done a film, screening in South Africa, so you're bringing it like across the continent. How are you thinking about audience, and how's that making you think about distribution for not only Our Land, Our Freedom, but also future work?
Yeah, so for Our Land, Our Freedom, I think, as I said, it was really important to make sure that we show it at home. And so right now we are actually dubbing the film into the mother language so that we can go deep. Because first, I think the most important thing is to just shift the narrative, to the Kenyan perspective, for people to really know what happened. I think truth is telling the truth so that people understand their roots, because we really don't, we are still taught a British history. So like this film will give that other side. And I think the other idea is to be able to, press whoever can see it, to help those people who are still living in, along the roadsides, who fought for freedom and never got justice. So I think like that's our big impact goals. But in terms of, so we started out going in because also of the kind of the content that we have, which is a bit, it might be a bit sensitive at home. So we started, we've been showing a lot internationally. Actually, South Africa was our first screening in the continent, and then, then we'll come back home. So we're very excited, to kind of show it. We know, like different reactions, but so it was like first at home, in the continent, in the UK, and then to the colonizing countries, because I mean, this is a version of history. Everyone who sees it, they say, I didn't know. Yeah. I've never seen this before.
Well, and I think that's also a good, as you're talking about dubbing it in the mother language, and I'm also seeing the ASL interpreter, I think we sometimes don't prioritize subtitling or dubbing in the languages so that it is accessible to folks who really will want to see this film or is the audience for the film. And I know it is so hard to fundraise for your film, but I think it's so important for like filmmakers out there to prioritize that, and that is just like you wouldn't release the film without, correcting the color or mixing the sound. I would try to prioritize making it accessible to folks with disabilities, as that's to me been, a real silver lining in the pandemic, is how moving to virtual, we thought about how to create more accessibility, and Filmmakers with Documentary, FWD Docs, has all the resources you could need to think about like what that means at every stage of production. But I think that just needs to become a line item, not only like a film that might have might need to be subtitled in language. I wish we all had the Netflix budget to do 60 languages for every film, but like, I think funders will care and will appreciate that you value, the captioning and the interpretation for your film and why it needs to be in that language, because that does expand the audience, and not only prioritizing, a hearing audience or a seeing audience that speaks English. I think that's a way that we kind of reinforce some of the Western lens in our own films and stories. Okay, we have a couple questions now, so I'm excited to turn it to the Q&A. So there's a question from Jessica. How have you cultivated collaboration in an industry that sometimes is making artists, filmmakers, producers, etc., competitors for resources and funding? And a part two, what do you recommend or believe needs to be happening to properly resource this work? So how do you collaborate when you're all competing for resources, and what needs to change, or what do you think needs to happen so we can all be properly resourced? Jude, you raised your eyebrows, so I'm taking that as you have ideas.
No, I'm raising it because I was like, I don't have the answer to this. How would I know? I don't know. I think I don't know. I mean, being part of all of these fellowships has been so amazing because I feel like in a lot of the fellowships, whether it was like Brown Girls or Firelight, like you end up working with a lot of the filmmakers on future projects, and it just kind of does become this ecosystem where, you know, oh, I hired you to be my editor, and then I'm going to work on your film as a producer. And I think that that's really beautiful. I mean, it's supposed to be this collaborative process. I know now it's getting really tough because of how competitive it is, and there's so many filmmakers and so many projects. So I don't have the answer to part two.
I think for me, I mean, I'll talk on behalf of, you know, a region that has very little, you know, kind of regional funding, but also we have access to other funding. So it's always, I think, coming together. You have to have lots of conversations and figuring out the like-minded people, because like, for example, someone will come to you and say, you know, we are going to raise this much, so we are going to get this percentage because, you know, you can't raise the money from your country. And I'd say, but like, I'll be doing all the work. Like I'll be, you know, my being there is reducing your budget by say 70%. So that is already my big percentage in this, you know. So I think it's figuring a way on how to really, you know, have those conversations that don't also, it's not also only about the money. It's about like what you're bringing in. You're from there, you know the language, you have equipment on the ground, you know. Yeah, I think it's those conversations are like, how do we cooperate? How do we come together to make a film that we want to tell? Not about like, oh, I'm coming from this region that has a lot of funding, so I'm the one who's going to take all the rights. So I think for me, like, that's how I've been doing it with the farm. Like the good thing, like, you know, with our Land and Freedom, it was from the very start, we agreed on how we were going to, and so anyone else who came in, we were negotiating. So remember, we've been working for 7 years. So that is, you know, sweat equity. We did it. So, and those are the conversations. And then, yeah, so you figure out how to work, because, I mean, yeah, there's little funding for a lot of filmmakers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And going back to the people who trusted you, and then that, you know, I think if one big fund kind of trusts you, then others start kind of say, oh, okay. Then, you know, and also us, we have to, you know, if you say you're delivering a film, you have to deliver a film, although it's two ways. If that makes sense.
Pallavi, you're stepping into a leadership role with ADOC, so you're both going to be working on your own independent work and thinking about how to serve like a broader community of independent filmmakers. So what do you think needs to happen to help, you know, everyone feel resourced and supported in ADOC?
I think I'm seeing an interesting shift in the way people lead in this space, in this kind of co-partnership model. If you look at ADOC and Brown Girls Doc Mafia, they have co-directors, and Zippy, you and Mina are an inspiration to me. I don't think I will in the future embrace a feature doc without a co-director. I think there's something about working in community with people for the same goal that makes us feel like we're not in competition with each other. And I'll give you an example. So we have at ADOC, I'm on the series producing team of our storytelling initiative, where we've put out series of microdocs and short 10-minute short films. And it used to be that there was a lead series producer, and now we've moved to a co-supervising producer model. And so there's 3 of us on this team, and I'll give a shout out to my colleagues, Anuradha Rana and Lily Chi, and just say that, so we are all we're working at ADOC, and we're all also working on our own feature docs. And it has never felt competitive, because we're just kind of in it together. And so if I see a resource that might support one of their films, I share it. Or we might all be working on applying to ITVS, and we're rooting for each other. But I think there's just a shift when you build meaningful relationships with people, and and then you're not, it's just like, then you're not in competition. All right. I haven't felt like that way in the CAM fellowship that I was in, or in the BAVAC fellowship that I'm in now, or in this team at ADOC, because we're all rooting for each other. I mean, there's no getting around the numbers and the competitiveness and, you know, how many people get selected versus how many applicants there were. But I do think that just cultivating those meaningful relationships really helps us grow. And yeah, I think another thing, this is not on the industry side, but I will say that just what has helped me as an independent filmmaker is to really work hard to find private donors. That's hard because just as a woman of color, just growing up, I was never taught to be comfortable asking for money. And I think I've been working on shifting that, and I'm still not, but I'm working on it, and I have producers on my team who will also take the hit for me and make the ask for me, but I'm also doing the ask. And that has been something when I'm not getting industry love, like I'm nurturing those relationships locally, and it's paying off. And so I just want to encourage people not to give up if the competitive landscape isn't serving you. There are other resources, and if you want any advice about that, feel free to reach out to me.
You're all making me think too. When I oversaw the Doc Lab, there was always a retreat on sustainability, and not just this film, but like sustaining your career as a filmmaker. And for a period, we would send everyone a book, a copy of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, which I really recommend folks read, or just, just go on her website and learn about it. But it is a really different kind of way of thinking about power and abundance and shifting it to a more collective model. But one of our alums, Patrick Lee, I love that he took that idea of abundance from it and would shift that to proposal writing. And rather than feeling in competition, feeling like there is abundance for everyone and that they're all part of, a community, and would ask who's applying, say to ITVS, would you read my proposal? Can I read yours? And they would set like deadlines before the deadlines and support each other. And even if it was like one or two people who did it, but I thought it was so great that he was shifting it from that competitiveness to how can I help you and how can you help me? Because often with other filmmakers, you do have a sense of the story they're telling. So I do think there are some good resources there. And Emergent Strategy, I think, has been really powerful for some of our filmmakers at Firelight to think about a shift in mindset. There's some questions in the chat that I'm wondering if we can condense. There's people that are like transitioning into film. Fiona talked about making a transition into film. So just ask for advice for someone who's transitioning into the film industry from a different background. And someone else, Glenn, who's new to the ecosystem and is asking about what funding sources exist. So I think keep it super top line, but like, what would be your like piece of advice for someone who's transitioning? Like, what do you wish you knew when you were starting out, or when you were looking for funding, or what are like the hard lessons learned? Like, where did you find you actually started to like find that?
I think for me, just like that transition, like when I moved to New York, for example, and I really wanted to just pursue being a cinematographer, I reached out to like maybe 50 female DPs, sent an email, I'm a Lebanese filmmaker, I'd love to shadow you. And I think that's part of it, is just like really throw yourself in it. And if you want to get into editing, to shadow an editor. Yeah, that was really helpful for me.
You staged in the restaurant industry, that would be called staging.
Yeah, there's no money, but
there's no money with staging either. They feed you, that's it, but there's no money. Zippy, what about you? Any advice for someone stepping into the industry, or how did you start to find funding? Where do you recommend a new filmmaker start to look for funding?
Yeah, I think same as Jude, you really kind of like try and, come close to people who have been on that road, and to guide you. But also, yeah, exactly. I think it's that, like, find people who've been there and then try to team up with people who kind of know the ropes. there are a lot of, there's a lot of funds, but there's also a lot of people applying for the funds. So you can look at what's relevant, especially for us, from Africa, from the continent. There are specific funds that you can tap into that are, they kind of allow you. There's some that you can't apply if you don't have a co-producer from, say, the States or from Europe. So you have to do the homework and figure out the ones that are relevant to you. But they are there. But again, don't just go very deep. Go to people who've been there. Come to us, I guess, because we learned. It's been it's been a long road to get here. So and we are there to.
Glenn, I'm going to answer it for you. Actually, the IDA has an amazing resources page, which actually lists many funds. And because it's international, it's not just US based. And a trick that I also learned when I was coming up that I think is still true, that films you love or films that feel like the types of films you want to make or thematically are like the ones you're making, look at the credits. Who funded them? Like that actually is still like a tried and true research method, because you might start to see that they fund the types of films that you want to make or are making and need support for. So I think start with IDA, but also just pay attention to who are the folks that are resourcing these films that you love. We're gonna have to wrap up soon, but there is one last question I want to get to about impact funding, and someone that is, Carlin is making an impact mission driven film. There's a separate budget for impact campaign. So is that something you'd include in your proposal budget, or how have you thought about impact when you're also raising funds for the film?
Quickly, it is a separate budget because, but it's good to start thinking of that budget when you're making the film. In theory, for us, we started thinking midway, and we actually got some impact funding before we finished making the film. But it's, but then I think the importance of getting an impact producer, because as filmmakers, we are just into the story. We have a lot to think about. But we hired an impact producer who's doing a lot of the impact work that is able to drive a bit more. Otherwise, then we get very behind if it's us doing all the work.
Mm-hmm. That's what. And Doc Society actually has really good templates and resources too around impact campaigns. So Carlin, I would go to Doc Society's website. That's a good starting point, because they have made some of this kind of more visible to folks, so you're not starting from scratch. Okay. We do have to wrap up, but there's this one last question I want to get to, and then I promise we'll do a quick wrap up. But someone said, because we're recommending that people go and shadow and ask for advice and ask for time. So Anonymous asked, well, how do you differentiate people who are willing to give you the chance to learn, especially if they might be, white male filmmakers, versus someone who's trying to take advantage of you or are just ignoring you as a beginning filmmaker? Anyone want to? I would say trust your guts. No one else is speaking up, but it's also not all skin folk or kinfolk. Like, it's not always white male filmmakers. It's also someone who can be from your racial or ethnic community, or your gender, that also can, there can be power dynamics that can be challenging. And I think if someone's listening, if someone has humility, if they seem genuinely interested and enthusiastic about what you're doing, I think just be clear about your ask, respect people's time, but, be able to walk away too if it doesn't actually seem like something that is going to be a learning opportunity, or if you don't feel respected or heard. Just because I have also been in those situations, but you've got to be able to walk away. But I think also I always tell people, be clear in your ask. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that. And then I think I've got to turn it to the folks at IDA to wrap up.
I'll just add, if you can, don't work for free. I know there's shadowing and there's also things you can do to contribute to a film, that someone else is working on. And there's ways to learn and still work and get paid. And the only time that I would consider, working for free is if there was some kind of mutual exchange. And so maybe, you're doing camera work for someone and then they're editing for you or something like that. But just know your worth think about it and know your worth and assert that.
Well, thank you, Pallavi, for inviting me, for Jude and Zippy for being part of this conversation. We definitely could have talked more, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about your experience and excited for the new work you're developing. And I think we're all can't wait to see Coach Emily, Pallavi. So we're all rooting for you and those young women. Maria, I will turn it to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And even just to add to that last question that I think was very, very brave to ask, also use each other. You know, it's like Zippy, Jude, Pallavi today really shared with us their experiences, their personal experiences. And if you go up to other filmmakers and ask, they're willing to have those conversations with you about what it is like to work with certain folks. And even if it's difficult, it doesn't mean you shouldn't work with them, you know? So thank you all for all of this knowledge, for sharing the knowledge. I think it's really important today for me to say that a focus is not exclusion, right? So today we really focused on filmmakers of color, what it is that they're navigating this industry, but that doesn't mean that any of this advice can't be used by folks who don't identify as people of color. So I hope there was a little bit of everything for everyone. Monika, thanks so much for guiding us through this conversation. There will be an audience experience survey sent out to everyone who joined us today. So please fill that out at your capacity to help us improve our programs. And then next week, we will actually have our last panel in the series by Janai Boulos. It's going to be called Working with Broadcasters, Getting Independent Film Voices Heard. So Katie will drop that registration in the chat. Feel free to register, and hopefully I'll see you all next week. But if not, see you around in the virtual spaces or in festivals around town. Thanks again, y'all. Bye-bye.